slot to Bobby Hull. There's the shot. Whoa! And contact was hit and knocked flat. He's got bruises all over his body from other shots taken in this series. Watching him in the dressing room the other night, one shoulder was yellow and blue and orange, every color in the rainbow it appeared.
When you talk about athletic charisma, you're talking about, in my opinion, two individuals who were absolutely head and shoulders above the pack. Perhaps three. One would be Muhammad Ali, the other would be Joe Willie Namath, and the third would be Bobby Hull. When Bobby would wind up with that slap shot, it was like the eruption of Mount Vesuvius.
Every era has one player who makes the entire arena hold its breath. In the late 1950s and through the 1960s, that player was Bobby Hull of the Chicago Blackhawks. He skated at nearly 30 miles per hour. His slap shot traveled at 118 miles per hour, roughly 35 miles per hour faster than any other player in the league. Fans blew golden whistles every time he scored. Goaltenders prayed they would not face him. As sports journalist Darcy Jenish once wrote, at his peak, Bobby Hull was the most electrifying performer, the one who left audiences breathless and goaltenders terrified. Before Bobby Hull ever touched a puck, his body alone sent a message. He stood 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed around 190 pounds. But what set him apart was the sheer density of his muscle. His arms measured 17.25 inches around, a number more commonly associated with heavyweight boxers than hockey players. His chest was described by teammates as a literal barrel, generating enormous leverage with every single swing of his stick. That physical engine powered one of the most terrifying skating speeds the sport had ever recorded. Hull reached a top speed of 29.7 miles per hour without the puck, and still maintained 28.3 miles per hour while controlling it. At roughly 86 kilograms, moving at nearly 13 meters per second, the momentum he carried down the left wing was a mathematical problem that defensemen simply could not solve. Bobby Orr, the legendary defenseman of the Boston Bruins, put it plainly, Hull skated at full speed even while handling the puck. That is a kind of pressure nobody else could create. His teammate Stan Mikita added, "There are great athletes who do not need to practice, and Bobby Hull was one of them. Everything came to him completely naturally." To understand why Bobby Hull terrified goaltenders at a level beyond any other player, you must understand one critical fact about that era. Most goaltenders played without a face mask. There was no protection between their face and whatever came at them. And what came at them from Hull traveled at 118 miles per hour. Gump Worsley of the Montreal Canadiens was one of the most respected goaltenders of his generation. Before facing Hull, Worsley famously said, "Anyone who wears a mask is a coward." Those words would come back to haunt him. In a game at Chicago Stadium in the late 1960s, Hull fired a slap shot from roughly 25 feet away that struck Worsley directly in the temple. He lost consciousness immediately and was carried off the ice on a stretcher, taken to hospital for monitoring of a serious head injury. Glenn Hall, Hull's own teammate with the Chicago Blackhawks, was no stranger to the damage either. Hall was struck in the mouth during a practice session and required 23 stitches before returning to the ice. He later admitted, "Hull's shot when he was young was wild and dangerous." Hall once said that 10 minutes of practice facing Hull was already more than enough for one day. Gordie Tummelson, a former goaltender who played alongside Hull in Winnipeg, was equally direct. Most goaltenders were genuinely afraid. They did not enjoy having that slap shot flying straight at their head. What made Bobby Hull truly impossible to stop was not just his speed or his shot. It was the fact that no injury, no matter how severe, could remove him from the fight. During the 1963 playoffs against the Detroit Red Wings, Hull suffered a serious fracture to his nose that extended into his skull. Doctors ordered him to remain in hospital. He checked himself out, boarded a flight to Detroit with a face that was visibly deformed, both eyes blackened, his nose heavily bandaged, and blood continuously draining down the back of his throat. He did not just play. He scored 3 goals and added 1 assist, helping Chicago to victory. In 1969, at the age of 30, Hull broke his jaw. He refused to leave the lineup. He played the entire season with his jaw wired shut, taking all his nutrition through a straw, and lost 20 pounds before the final game was over. Phil Esposito, one of the greatest scorers in NHL history, reflected, "Good Lord, standing near someone like Bobby Hull. That is when you realize you are standing next to a true legend." Then there was the matter of defenseman Bobby Baun of the Toronto Maple Leafs, one of the few players who could physically match up against Hull. After Baun had stopped him 6 consecutive times in one game, Hull fired a slapshot directly at Baun's foot. The force was enough to tear the toenail completely away from inside the skate, exposing the tissue beneath. Joe Daly, a goaltender who practiced alongside Hull in Winnipeg, said it plainly. "He had the hardest shot in the world. I went home after practice covered in bruises from challenging that shot." Bobby Hull's presence on the ice did not just threaten individual players. It forced every team in the NHL to rethink their defensive strategy entirely. Double teaming became the standard response whenever Chicago took the ice. 2 defenders assigned to 1 man. Physical harassment on every shift. Opponents deliberately targeted his skates, trying to wear down his edges and slow his acceleration. None of it worked consistently enough to matter. Even the greatest players in the league admitted what Hull did to their instincts. John Beliveau, the legendary captain of the Montreal Canadiens, was once shown a photograph of himself attempting to stop Hull during a game. He laughed and said, "I remember exactly what I was doing in that moment, trying to make myself as thin as possible." That was not a joke. That was a survival reflex from one of the finest players who ever lived. John Ferguson, reflecting on Hull's combination of speed and physical power during the 1960s, said, "He did not just have speed, he had the strength of a bull. When he decided to engage physically, that was no laughing matter." Before Bobby Hull, scoring 50 goals in a single NHL season was considered the absolute ceiling of human possibility. Only 2 players in history had ever reached it, Rocket of the Montreal Canadiens and Bernie Geoffrion. The number carried a kind of sacred weight that the entire sport had accepted as a permanent limit. On March 12, 1966, Hull shattered that limit. He scored his 51st goal of the season against the New York Rangers, becoming the first player in history to cross that threshold. The goal came the way most of his goals did: a burst of acceleration from his own zone, past the defense, and a slap shot from 40 feet out. Chicago Stadium erupted. The crowd refused to stop cheering for 7 full minutes. It was not a single moment of greatness. Hull led the NHL in goals 7 times during the 1960s and recorded 5 seasons of more than 50 goals before leaving for the World Hockey Association. In 1972, Bobby Hull did something that frightened NHL owners far more than any slapshot ever could. He left. Hull signed with the Winnipeg Jets of the newly formed World Hockey Association, agreeing to a contract worth $1,750,000 United States dollars over 5 years, which included an unprecedented signing bonus of $1 million. No hockey player had ever been paid anything close to that figure. The impact was immediate. Hull's decision gave the World Hockey Association instant credibility and transformed it into a genuine competitor to the NHL. Faced with a rival league capable of attracting the greatest player in the sport, NHL owners were forced to dramatically increase salaries across the board to prevent further departures. One analyst summarized the consequences directly. Every hockey player earns more money today because of the risk Bobby Hull was willing to take. He did not just score goals, he broke a monopoly. And that, to the men who controlled the sport, was perhaps the most terrifying thing he ever did. No honest account of Bobby Hull can end with the goals and the records. The full picture is far more complicated. Hull faced serious and documented accusations of domestic violence against 2 of his former wives. His second wife, Joanne McKay, described incidents of severe physical abuse, including being held over a balcony in Hawaii and being threatened with a loaded firearm in 1978. These actions caused a lasting estrangement between Hull and several of his own children. In 1998, Hull gave an interview to the Moscow Times in which he made statements expressing racist views and sympathy toward ideas associated with Adolf Hitler. The remarks drew widespread condemnation and forced organizations, including the Chicago Blackhawks, to distance themselves from him publicly. A hockey writer captured the painful contradiction plainly. Bobby Hull was a great player and a deeply flawed human being. You cannot separate the art from the artist when the artist is the one who created it. His greatness on the ice was real. So was the damage he caused off it. Bobby Hull passed away in 2023 at the age of 84. His family donated his brain to Boston University for research. The results confirmed what many had quietly suspected. Hull had been living with stage 2 chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated physical impacts accumulated over a lifetime in the sport. In his final decade, he struggled with short-term memory loss, poor judgment, and significant changes in behavior. His longtime teammate, Stan Mikita, was diagnosed with the same condition. Together, their cases pushed the NHL and the NHL Players Association to establish advisory committees dedicated to protecting the long-term brain health of players. The speed and power that made Bobby Hull the most feared player of his era had quietly been destroying him from within all along. Who do you think was the most terrifying player in NHL history? Bobby Hull or someone else? Tell us in the comments below.